Welcome to Meet the Artist. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe because you know I gotta say that crap. This is Ken Christensen, and he is a painter, and it looks like he paints with oil, if I had to guess. I did take some pictures, so I'll put them in there because this palette is fabulous. I love that. So, I would like to know a little bit about your history. Like, where did you come from as an artist, but even personally? Like, what was your life like growing up?
Well, I'm from Michigan, very typical family life. Went to Michigan State University. I didn't know I wanted to be an artist at that time, so I have a BA degree in history. And it wasn't until, I don't know, a couple of years, well, not even, it was during kind of a period I had dropped out of college, and I spent a winter in Jamaica. And while I was down there, I met a girl who was a watercolor painter. So I had painted as a hobby and shown some talent. My parents encouraged me. I took different art classes, went to some adult night classes and all. But as I said, I really wasn't thinking of a career in art. But meeting this young woman who was painting, I was fascinated watching her. And when she went back to the States, she gave me her watercolor palette.
Oh,
So
cool.
exactly, I was thrilled too. I thought, are
Yeah.
you really going to give me this? And just your simple portable
It's
plastic one,
that's a
but
big thing, though.
it's like getting a box of magic tricks or something.
Correct, yeah.
And at that time, I signed on to a cargo ship in the Caribbean, went to 10 islands in the West Indies down to South America.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I'll get a pad and I'll do a different painting at each island, because each island we would stop at for a day. And so I did that on the way down and on the way back. So over a month, I did maybe 25, 30 watercolors. And as anyone would learn doing enough work, you automatically get better just by working.
Yeah.
And when you get better, then it's more fun and encouraging. And when you do it every day, then it becomes a more natural process. And honestly, since that day, I've painted almost every day, ever since then.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do that as a profession. And I ended up moving to Traverse City, Michigan. I had a couple of different jobs. But the first thing I did to make money as an artist, I did people's Christmas cards of their homes.
Oh, that's cool.
And I
What a
would
great
do a
idea.
pen and ink drawing of their house. And I worked out a little deal with the printer in town. And, well, it's kind of a long story, but to keep it short, it was moderately successful. And I was very pleasantly surprised. Then I did a series of postcards of historic buildings in town. And then I started to get a little bit of attention where business people hired me to do ads for the newspaper. I was hired to do book illustrations. And then when summer came around, I started doing art fairs. And in Northwest Michigan, it's a resort area. There's art fairs in every little town. And did quite a few of those, and then dropped the other jobs I had. And I was probably 24 years old, 24, 25, and I've been a full-time artist ever since then.
Congratulations. That is the dream. Like, you are living the dream.
I am. I've been very, very lucky.
What brought you here?
Well, one word is climate.
Fair enough.
I've moved around quite a bit. I moved to England when I was 29. I lived in London for a year. And then I ended up living in France for 8 years. I lived in Paris 5 years and on the Côte d'Azur for 3 years. I lived in Spain for a year. And then I invited a girlfriend that I had in Spain to come back to the States with me. And we went back to northern Michigan. And then we started to split our time between northern Michigan in the winter and Santa Fe, New Mexico. What am I saying? Michigan in the summer and Santa Fe, New Mexico in the winter. Again, climate.
Right.
Because I've always painted outdoors.
Right.
Part of that is I prefer it. It's more stimulating. It's more exciting. I love nature. I love painting outdoors. And then also, being poor, I never really had a studio or had the space to paint indoors.
So it
And
just
so it
made
was
sense to-
always outdoors. So anyway, lived in Santa Fe, split time like that for 7 years, and really a good experience. Showed in one of the best galleries in town. That went really well. Summers in northern Michigan are paradise. But we eventually married, Paca, my wife and I, and had 2 children. And this going back and forth from Michigan to New Mexico got more and more complicated because we owned a house in Michigan, but we rented in Santa Fe. Every year we'd have to find a different place to rent. And kids going to school and moving them around and everything. So then became this obsession of where to stay put. And so there are all these possibilities. My wife being Spanish, it was a possibility, let's move to Spain, let's move to France, where I prefer, perhaps Florida, where I'd spent some time painting as well, the Southwest, again, stay put in Santa Fe all year. And so these were all in the mix. And I had an artist friend in Michigan whose parents lived here in Los Osos. And he was going to drive out, wanted somebody to share the drive. And I thought, well, this give me a chance to check out California again as a possibility. Now, I had worked at a casino at Lake Tahoe when I was 19 years old. And so I knew a little bit about California, but it had been many, many years. And I came out. And I liked it. I wasn't really overwhelmed, to be perfectly honest. And after you've lived in San Tropez and Santa Fe and some other places, it's nice here. It's very nice. But then went back to Michigan, came back out again, pretty much explored California from Napa to Ventura. And finally thought, well, you know what? Los Osos is pretty nice. It's not as developed, as crowded. The traffic's not as bad. And for a landscape painter, there's a good variety of subject matter. For my wife, I think there's kind of a Spanish influence in California, nice place to raise kids, etc. So it was sort of a logical decision, and moved here, gosh, it's been 21, 22 years ago now. And I've actually lived here longer than any other place in my life.
How do you, when we were talking earlier, you kind of talked about, like, you've been here long enough to, like, paint everything in the city, so... do you still travel? Like, do you still go to
Well, I'm
other
leaving for
countries?
Europe in 3 weeks. I'm
Okay,
going
good.
to Dresden, Germany, where my older daughter now lives. She's an adult now. And then we're going to Greece. I've got a house on a Greek island for a couple of weeks.
Nice.
Still travel quite a bit. Of course, COVID kind of stopped that for a while, but I generally go back to France almost every year. I still have very current friendships there. I'm most comfortable in France, obviously after living there a long time, and I speak the language, and it feels like my second home. So, yeah, I'm so obsessed with France that I've kind of deprived other places. And what happened with COVID, we all kind of thought, well, this bucket list, how many of these things we were going to get to? And so this is kind of the first time I'm going to Europe in decades without going to France, which I feel a little bad about.
Right.
But I've never been to Greece, and so that's a dream come true. And then Portugal is on my list, and many other places. So we'll see as time goes on.
Fun. Yeah, it's nice to be able to get out and travel.
Well, when I travel, I like to go someplace and stay put for 3-4 weeks at least, and settle in and feel at home and be able to paint locally and really feel what that local atmosphere is like. And I don't really like to run around as much anymore.
Right.
I used to. Oddly enough, this palette in the art catalogs is called The French Mistress. I don't know where they
That's
come
a
up with
great
these
name.
ideas. But it just got so heavy, it was just breaking down the legs of my easel. And they make another model called, which is smaller and doesn't weigh as much. So I use the Mini Mistress on site, and this one has become my permanent in-studio palette.
That's great.
Well, you can see the layers there.
Yeah.
You know, I scrape it down every time I'm done painting. So even after scraping it down, it's gradually building up that much. And the weight, I mean, just try and lift that. Feel how heavy that is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's... Okay. And that's interesting that you scrape it off.
Well, you have to have like a clean area in the middle to mix your paint, and it needs to be done again there. I can see, you know, from the last time I painted, I didn't do that, but it's not hard to kind of scrape out that middle. And if I'm painting almost daily, well, then those gobs of paint stay fresh, and I simply add to the bigger gobs.
Right.
Well, it's interesting, you know, I could tell an artist simply by their palette. You recognize what colors artists use in what quantities. One of the galleries in Santa Fe, they've got an exhibit of palettes on the wall that artists have given them. And some artists have even done a little painting in the middle or signed them. But it's really interesting. You just see the personality of that artist right in the palette and the colors they choose.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that makes perfect sense. Like, even if I were to look at my paintings and I'm like, yeah, I choose very similar colors often because they're what make me feel good. You know, like the painting behind you would be very similar colors that I would choose to work with. So that's interesting. But what a great display too. Like super interesting, right? Just to see all of the palettes. So, do you paint more now, or than you used to when you were younger?
Well, frankly, probably a little less.
Okay.
I mean, there was always this panic of survival most of my life. And for example, when I lived in Europe, England and France, etc., I survived largely by selling sketches in the streets. I would set up outside of a shop, often a restaurant, do a pen and ink drawing, go in and offer it to the owner, and I lived day to day. I had zero money, and I was not a legal resident. I wasn't legal to work.
Right.
And so there was a panic of survival, and then the idea of trying to get better. And I was in a hurry to get better, and so I was trying to just crank them out to improve as fast as possible. So I imagine, I don't want to exaggerate too much, but I was probably painting 6 days a week, 6 or 7, every single day at every moment. I was never without a sketch pad in my pocket at all times. I'm talking going to parties. I go to a party and I do portraits throughout the evening. I'd sit in a cafe, I'd be drawing. So I was obsessed with getting better.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't so much work as it was my life.
Practice. Well,
yeah. Every painting, practice for the next. And that is more or less continued, but I shifted more towards oil painting and more towards supplying works for the gallery, painting a little bit more deliberately. And then when you have kids and other things going on, well, that eats up part of your time. In Michigan, eventually, I owned my own gallery, and then at the buildings that I bought, there were 2 buildings. The big one I turned into a gallery, and the smaller one I turned into a used bookstore because I'm a book fanatic.
Yeah, so you'll see that. You see all the books behind us?
So I spent a lot of time hunting for books. The pleasure of owning a bookstore is buying books, not selling them. And so
right.
that eats up time and, real life and everything else. So again, I'm not saying I painted a lot less, but maybe instead of 6 or 7 days a week, it was 5 or 6 days a week. Now I probably paint 4 or 5 days a week. I generally golf once a week.
Nice.
And often on the weekend, I take that time off because that's when other people are free to goof off and stuff. So I have a fairly normal work week, you might say. But the idea is to paint every day unless something else interferes.
Right, yeah. And to not let the painting get in the way of living.
Well, I mean, they're inseparable.
Well, for sure. Yeah, painting is living. Yeah, that's awesome. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Probably right here. Oddly enough, I've kind of come to a very cozy existence here after traveling and moving around a lot and a lot of ups and downs in my life. And I mean, I could very easily move back to France tomorrow because I love it there and I'm comfortable there. On the other hand, the last time I was in France for, I don't know, I was there 7 weeks. I started to feel like, you know what, it's almost too long. You have to make up where you really live. And right now I have everything I could possibly want here. I've got a really nice house. I have plenty of room. I've got a studio. I've got wonderful friends in the area. It's a nice area. The climate is perfect. And gallery representation is very good. I'm doing well making my living. So it'd be very hard to do better. I'm not saying, it's perfect here. It's good here. It's good other places. But, to move at this point, you have to start all over again, making friends and making business contacts.
Yeah.
So things could hardly be better than the way they are right now. So a few years down the road, I hope to be doing the exact same thing.
That's awesome. I'm imagining what your advice for younger artists would be.
My advice for a younger artist would be only do it if you have to. I would never encourage somebody to become an artist.
That's
no
way.
way. I've had parents ask me these kind of questions and all, and I say, I would not advise somebody to become an artist. Either you really want to become an artist or you don't. But it's not oh, what a great career, become an artist. No.
It's hard.
You got to take a vow of poverty to begin with. To become an artist, It's not about making money, obviously. You're doing something that you want to do, and if you're lucky enough, you will succeed in making a living at it. But if your motivation is as a job or making money, you're much better off in a different profession. I know many artists who they find one thing that sells or they're somewhat good at, and they do it over and over again. And I say, why are you even an artist?
Right.
You're going to make more money with that same approach doing something else.
Right.
I think if you're not sticking your neck out a little bit, you're really not serious about being an artist. You've got to stretch yourself all the time. But again, do it if you want to do it, because I love it.
Right.
And if that's
it's
the way
made a
you
living for
feel,
you.
it has been. I've been very, very fortunate. But
Yeah.
it's a tiny, tiny minority of people that make a living
Yeah.
at it. It's not an easy road, but the recompense is that, number one, I don't have a boss. I've been independent my entire life, 24/7 my entire life. I've done whatever I felt like at any given moment. And that is a wealth that
Yes,
you
it
cannot
is.
match.
No.
For me, true wealth is time.
Yeah.
Time is the ultimate value, and my time is my own. So, if you want to make money, you have to sell some of your time. You trade in your time for money.
Okay.
And I've traded in very little time. I'm not a wealthy person, but I've managed to support myself, and that's very, very
Right, you
fortunate.
raised a family, and
Yeah.
you were able to do all that. So, like when I said that, like you're living the dream, like that is, because I don't even know that as an artist, the desire is to be rich, right? But the desire
Some artists, there's
is,
plenty of artists who want to be
okay,
rich.
yeah, yeah,
More and more so. I think it really started in modern times with Picasso, the idea of the celebrity artist, where Picasso was world famous and extremely wealthy, and other artists thought, wow, that's
wanna do
a
that.
valid path. And you have people like Thomas Kincaid, who I'm sure his
Right.
motivation was to get rich. Or you have people like Jeff Koons or something,
Right.
where outrage sells. And, I don't judge any other art styles or artists. People have different motivations, and one of them is to get rich. So,
Okay.
art is an extremely large definition of why people do it and why people create art at all. But motivation by money, it's not going to produce the best art.
Right. It's going to be a much harder challenge.
Not necessarily. It could be an easier challenge. Doing something commercial. Doing
yeah.
something, let's say in modern art terms, something more shocking, or conceptual art, installation art. It could be easier.
Right.
Somebody who's working in obscurity, doing some minute little things that they love doing, could be very, very difficult, and they could be completely lost and forgotten. So it's not about ease so much. It's motivation, and the art market is a crazy, crazy world.
Right. Huh. So don't do it. That's So what in 5 years you're gonna be here. You really worked hard. You really worked hard.
Yeah,
Like, you were very
I don't-
intentional about your time.
I don't see it as work, but I put
Okay.
in a lot of
Okay,
time,
put in a lot of
definitely.
time. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. Are you glad?
Oh, I've been the luckiest person in the world. The life I've had, no millionaire could have had. The people I've met, the places I've been, the adventures that I've had. The one interesting thing about being an artist is I've associated with the highest cream of society and the lowest dregs. Now, most professions, you're in a certain strata of your profession or income level. I've been to exclusive things in Paris and Saint-Tropez and Santa Fe that just crazy experiences of, being on yachts of multimillionaires in Saint-Tropez and being at parties in Saint-Tropez with astronauts that walked on the moon, and just amazing things. On the other hand, I've associated with criminals, and I've had hitchhiked around and done things I'm not proud of and everything else, but an extremely rich, rich life. The amount of experiences, 1 week of my life in Paris would match somebody else's entire lifetime. Just crazy, crazy intense times.
Do you have any of your sketches from when you were younger?
Oh, do I have sketches? I have a bookcase full of sketchbooks there. Here, all that cabinet is full of sketchbooks. I have tons. As I said, when I lived in London, I survived mainly by sketching shops. Eventually, I started to get some commissions for watercolors and made some better connections. But what did I start to say now about the sketchbooks in London? Oh, I was thinking that I would try and do 2 shops a day. I was really depressed because I had like become flat broke, and it was a matter of like being able to survive to stay in Europe. And I decided, well, if I try and sell 2 sketches a day, if it works, it works, but at least I'm doing something. But what happened was it worked, and I did sell sketches. But then once I got doing sketches of shops, I would keep sketching throughout the day. So on a given day, I might do 4 complete drawings. Well, in 1 year, that's what, 1,300 drawings.
Yeah.
That's in 1 year. I've been working 40 years.
Right.
I mean, we're talking like.
But a lot of those you sold, or right?
Yeah, but I'm always producing way more than I sell. I mean, I sell pretty well to make a living, but I produce 5, 10 times more than I sell.
That's interesting.
Oh, I have sketchbooks like this, which sort of comes in handy. As I was saying, I sometimes paint from sketches.
Right.
Yeah, but also, when you sketch on site, you live that moment. And I can look at a sketch I did in London or in Santa Fe or whatever, and I remember the weather, I remember people that walk by, I remember what I was going through, I remember like the shop or the scene or whatever, and it comes back so strongly, stronger than any photo, because when you take a photo, you're walking along the street, boom, that's a nice picture.
Right.
Later you look like, where was I then?
Right.
When I look at my old sketchbooks, I remember every detail of being there.
At all the details
Well,
around you.
I'm living it for hours. I'm
Yeah.
sitting there for hours
Yeah.
watching life go by, and not just in a quick second snapping a picture.
Did you have like really great conversations? Did people stop and talk to you?
On occasion. I mean, that can be good, that can be bad.
Okay,
there are people who irritate you, get in the way. There's a lot of stories about irritating people. Occasionally, there's a rewarding one. I've had both.
I can see that, because
Considering each country, too, the people kind of react differently to seeing an artist painting in the street.
really,
I learn a lot about the culture. Well, in England, no one would really make a comment. The English, they would walk by and not even want to be caught catching a glimpse. Very reticent. The French are all experts.
Oh.
So when the French are looking, they immediately want to
be critical.
categorize.
Right.
Well, not so much as good or it's bad. It's like, oh, well, that's in this style. I know I've seen that before, and you're doing this. They know everything.
Right.
The Spanish would just kind of avoid you, very, very shy and timid, at least where I lived. Whereas the Italians go crazy. They love art so much, and they come out and like, oh, okay, Bella, oh, and they just make a big fuss and want to bring you something to drink or eat, and they're amazing people. So it's kind of interesting.
It is interesting.
Each country kind of reacts differently to people.
What kind of reaction do you get here when you're out painting?
Oh, well, this is a great area. As you know, it's pretty artistic. There's a lot of artists around here. So, I like a quick, brief compliment where somebody comes back and says, oh, that looks great, and keep moving.
Right,
That's the
yeah.
best.
Move on.
But,
Can't
people
you
are
see
very
I'm working
nice.
Here?
People are nice in this area.
Good, because I can imagine that. Although I don't know, I think that any kind of conflict or any kind of weirdness would probably add to the painting, right? Because it's going to be reflected in there.
Not really. You want to be in a, I don't want to say a peaceful frame of mind, but at least even tempered, let's say. Because you are focused on your work, and you're like in that work at that time, and you don't want to be distracted.
Right.
Now, back when I sketched in London or Paris, I would put up with taxi breaks and horns honking and everything else because I wanted to do that scene, even if it meant standing in the middle of the street. Now I'm a lot fussier, and I won't put myself into an uncomfortable situation, and here it's a little bit more about the nature than an urban landscape.
Right. What's your favorite to paint?
I like rooftops, aerial views. It always feels good looking down on a scene. Ideal scene, among many, but like a European village looking down at rooftops, you get those really interesting compositions of the different angles. Those are always fun, sure.
I like the idea of that you produce way more than you sell.
I'm shocked when I hear artists like who don't have a back catalog, and either they're not producing or they're sure selling an awful lot, because even Picasso, who sold like wildfire, he probably produced 10 times more than he ever sold. You know, when he died, his widow had to pay taxes on his estate, and she did that by donating so much work that they created the Picasso Museum in Paris. So I think they estimated Picasso produced something like 20,000 pieces of art. You know, maybe sold 1,000 in his lifetime. I don't know. But any artist worth their salt is producing way more than they're selling.
So where do you keep all of your...
You want to see?
Yes.
Come here, I'll show you.
Well, hang on, I gotta get my phone. Holy crap. I one time had a lot of pieces, and I like messaged one of my artist friends, and I'm like, what in the hell am I supposed to do with all of these? And they pack them up and put them in the garage. What? How do you decide what gets in a frame?
Well, I generally know where things are, honestly. This is double filed here. I just built this extra rack because behind it the rack is full. You see over here? Look along. See this rack behind there is completely full, and had to build another rack in front of that.
Oh my goodness.
There's no comparison. There's no comparison. As I say, I live that moment when I'm sketching and talking to the people coming along and everything else, and then, you know, you're picking out the details you want to record.
Right, yeah. And it's only your perspective. It's not like this random photo, right?
Well, you see in a painting or a drawing, it's often what you leave out. It's not a mere like, oh, look at all the details in that drawing. It's like, look at all the details that aren't there of telephone poles or a parked car or whatever.
Right.
So you're giving, I don't know if you call it an idealized version, but at least your personal version of what you're looking at. And then, you know, there might be some tweaking in composition and other things to make it look better.
Right. So fascinating. All right, now you get to talk. Tell me whatever you want to tell me, because I think that I feel like you are very blessed to have gotten to live the life you created, right? Like, you made a lot of these choices. Well, you made all of the choices. You worked hard. You were diligent. You were, you know, trying to be fed. And
well, the first thing is, if you follow your heart, you're not going to have regrets. It doesn't mean you're going to be a success. You might fall on your face. But if you're trying to make like a logical decision based on more intellectual or, I don't know, practical things, that might work out, but chances are there's going to be something eating at you that it wasn't really what you deeply wanted. And I've never had that feeling because I always did, as I said, what I wanted. Sometimes you got to make some compromises along the way, but to be able to do what I wanted all that time and have things turn out so well is kind of a surprise because you never know. I mean, I have other artist friends who have really struggled and continue to struggle. I know artists like, I've got a good friend in Paris, Benoit Debecker, and he is a fabulous graphic artist. He's published, 6 books of his work, and he is known in that community. He just lost his studio and had to move into a small, very small kind of studio apartment. He's broke. And as you get older, it's no fun being broke. It gets worse. When you're young, it's an adventure. It's fun.
correct.
I'll always remember when I was young, I had a friend in Paris, Nalo, who was an Argentinian classical pianist. And at the time, I was in my early 30s, and he was in his 80s. And I'd visit him frequently. And he had played concerts in Carnegie Hall in New York. That's how famous he was. And now he lived in a tiny, like, attic kind of a room in Paris, and he was getting by. He wasn't starving to death. But I thought, if someone that talented ends up in a little room like that, what are the chances for me?
Right.
And so, as I say, win or lose, I would have no regrets, but I've just been very, very lucky that things have turned out as well as they have, because there's a lot of little choices along the way, and moving here and there, different people you associate with, different ways of making a living, different things you're painting, just so many little factors, and the fact that things have turned out so well for me is just, I wouldn't say a miracle, but lucky anyway, and having made some good choices, and sometimes you bite the bullet and sometimes you celebrate.